everyone, welcome back to another exciting episode of Can It Take a K26, the show where I take a variety of blasters and see if they can be upgraded with a K26 spring. I am your host, Captain Xavier, and today we're going to be covering all of the bows that I have access to that are spring-powered. We're going to be starting, of course, with the Big Bad Bow, because it's the oldest one that I have. The Big Bad Bow was originally released in 1998 as part of the Hypersight series. It has been re-released a number of times in the early 2000s, as well as in 2009, which I believe this version is the 2009 version. There was also a 2011 N-Strike version and a 2012 Avengers version, a Hawkeye version, which I also have, but I decided to do this one. So, it works by pulling back the whole back half of the bow, and then it's got a trigger that releases, and then you push it back forward again to lock again. Normally, of course, it has bow arms, but they've long since been lost in time, largely because I didn't have room to store it with the bow arms, so I took them off and threw them away. Anyway, what we want to find out today is, can this thing take a K26? Now, it normally fires the big arrows. It's fairly easy to just take out this air restrictor and make it fire darts. I haven't bothered. I might, if it's able to take a K26, because then it would actually be fairly powerful. So, let's open it up and take a look. Alright, so a fair amount of this bloody thing is actually glued together, which is never okay. Le Gascon. Alright, so we're in. And I'm dubious. That thing right there that's just clipped on there basically is what is going to have to hold up to a K26, and my money is not on it. So we're gonna see what we can't reinforce that with. K26 fits, but it's actually kind of tight. Interesting. All right then. Yes, it can take a K26. I had to flare the bottom end of it to keep it from coming out the back of the plunger tube, and I had to rebarrel it for CPVC to get it to fire darts. It fires the arrows at about 50 FPS, but it will fire an elite dart at 130 FPS. So I consider that eminently functional. So, yeah, the Big Bad Bow, K26. Yes. On to the next contestant. Our next contestant is the successor to the Big Bad Bow, the Blazing Bow. The Blazing Bow was originally released in 2013 as part of the N-Strike line. It also fired arrows, the same arrows as the Big Bad Bow, in fact, but unlike the Big Bad Bow, it does not have any kind of a trigger mechanism. You simply pull it back and release. The strings aren't actually doing anything, though supposedly, I mean, as you can see with this one, somebody attempted to improve it by tightening the strings. I doubt it actually makes any noticeable difference, but it can't hurt. What we want to know, though, is, can it take a K26? It's just a massive, massive hole in the tank. It's also a ridiculously long spring in here, and K26 is not going to fit. Alright, so unfortunately, no, K26 will not fit. It is too small to fit around this enormous plunger rod. However, no. All hope is not lost. Big Bad Bow spring is too small also. It's also a really long spring, which is going to be the issue. But we have springs. Springs for days, kids. What we got here is an Exploders spring. Been meaning to disassemble this for the parts anyway, so why not now? Alright, well, it's a bit longer and it's decidedly heavier. Alright, that was a no for K26 because it's actually too small. but I was able to nest a pair of exploder springs together, and now it is hitting 100 FPS, which is kind of fun from a, pull back and release bow. So there you have it. On to the next contestant. Our next contestant is the Heartbreaker Bo. The Heartbreaker Bo was also released in 2013 as part of the Rebel line. And it is very similar to the Blazing Bow in function, in that you pull it back, and that's how you prime it and you release, except this one is actually inherently barreled for Elite. So let's take a look. Now the first thing that I notice about opening this is that the vast majority of the actual draw is purely cosmetic. They just have a little wind-up winch here that releases a bunch of string, and not until you get to the end of that does it actually start pulling the plunger. And then it actually has a fairly small plunger draw. But let's take a look at that plunger. Well, the good news is it's got an easy to remove AR, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that out. So it's not a particularly long spring, but that's okay. I happen to have a bit of K26 that is exactly the right length. So we'll just pop that right back on there. And it fits. Fits in the plunger tube, so that's good. Alright, it can in fact take K26. I'm yet to see how well it fires. I forgot to get the stock readings, and I don't have a stock one lying around, so if anybody knows how poorly these things shoot beforehand, let me know. I'm gonna go chrono the upgrade. Alright, well, I haven't replaced the barrel. It should definitely have a brass barrel because, like any Nerf gun, the barrel's not tight. But even without a brass barrel, it's hitting 70, which I imagine with a brass barrel you'd probably get at least 80, maybe a little bit higher. So that's kind of fun. It's not the most accurate thing in the world, but it's really neat. I actually made one of these for my friend Jake, where I took off the bow arms and took out all of the fake draw, so it only draws back about that far, and has a little pistol that looks vaguely like a Star Trek phaser, and you just pull it back about that far, and it fires, and it actually fires fairly well. That one has a brass barrel. This one doesn't. I probably would if I were gonna sell it or give it to somebody, but for now, there you have it. Yes, the Heartbreaker Bo can take a K26. On to the next contestant. Our final contestant for this bow episode is the Mega Thunder Bow. The Mega Thunder Bow was originally released in 2014 as part of the N-Strike Elite Mega series, and unlike all of the other blasters, it kind of uses the string. The string isn't what actually powers it, but you do have to pull the string to prime it, and then releasing it actually fires, which is kind of neat. It's got a 5-barrel AR system, and is kind of fun. But we want to know if it can take a K26. So, let's find out. That is all kinds of fascinating, and look, great big gears, which don't bode well, because they're, yeah, interesting. Well, for science! Well, there's the plunger tube removed, and fortunately, very fortunately, looks like the plunger head screws off. It has, again, a fairly long spring, but it's not actually necessary for it to be that long, and so we're only going to put in as much K26 as is necessary to keep it tight. Interestingly, in this bow, like the big bad bow, compression is actually an issue because there actually is a catch. When you pull it back, the gun does in fact come all the way back and catch, and then when you release the string, it then releases the catch. The Heartbreaker Bow and the Blazing Bow didn't have that issue, so it didn't matter how much it compressed, so as long as you were getting some increase in power, it would work just fine. This one, that becomes an issue again, so we have to hope that it can still get enough compression, which it can. So, we're good. We just have to figure out how on earth you put this thing back together. So the issue is not with the gears, the issue is not with the compression. The issue is the bow arms are too flexible and are bending, and it's not getting all the way back to catching. Alright, well, I'm going to open it back up, put the stock back in, and leave this thing alone. Alright, well, that was a no for the Mega Thunder Bow. Rather tragic. The general consensus was the gears couldn't take it. I found it was, in fact, that the bow arms had a little too much give within the whole mechanism. Similar to a number of blasters, kind of like similar to blasters like the Battle Scout and the Guardian Crossbow. Anything that has a non-direct prime tend to not be able to take the power of a K26 because parts bend that oughtn't to be bending. So that's a no. Let's recap. Alright, for those of you keeping score at home or who just skipped to the end to see the results, that was a yes for the Big Bad Bow. That was a no for the Blazing Bow. That was a yes for the Heartbreaker Bow. And that was a no to the Thunder Bow. Fairly predictable results, really. I was actually expecting the Blazing Bow to be able to, but it turns out the plunger rod's too big. So it was able to have a very hefty spring upgrade, and I'm quite pleased with it, and I like the colors. It'll be going on my wall. This one I might also then paint up in my colors, because I was actually really pleased with how it came out. The other two, not so much. This one, if you brass the barrel, it'd probably be okay. This one, I didn't even bother to try to put a spring upgrade in, because the way the mechanism works, it's not really prone to modification. You could, I believe, make it a direct prime. If you added some kind of a mechanism directly to the plunger rod that came out the back, and you could get it to not interfere with the catch mechanism, it might be possible to make it direct prime, and then you would have to add some kind of a release, probably in the form of some kind of a trigger, but what you would end up having is a very awkward, very large 5-shot AR pistol, which wouldn't be terrible, but it would definitely be able to take a K26, and it might be something that somebody would be interested in. But given that we have things like the Magnus and the Cyclone Shock, it's really not going to give you a particularly viable blaster. But that would be a way to upgrade that if you really wanted to. Alright, if you have any comments, concerns, suggestions, things you want to see in future episodes, go ahead and put them in the comments below, and as always, thank you for watching.